Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're listening to Reformed Thinking. And here we take the materials you send us, could be articles, research, notes, and we really try to extract some compelling insights. So today, our mission, if you will, is to unpack a single, pretty remarkable Hebrew word, that's zalapa.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
It really is. Our materials for this deep dive, they come from a good range of sources. We've got lexical entries, scholarly notes, and of course the biblical references where, this word really comes alive.
Right. The context is key.
Absolutely. So our goal here is to uncover the multiple layers of what this word conveys. Everything from the natural world, raw forces, right through to human experience, suffering, and even divine action.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. We want to reveal its kind of surprising nuances and show how just one word, carefully chosen, can paint such vivid, evocative pictures of some really intense phenomena.
And it's quite striking, isn't it, how a single term can carry such diverse, yet somehow connected meanings across these different contexts.
Yeah.
As we dig into it, it really does act like a linguistic window. It gives us a glimpse into an ancient worldview where concepts often intertwined in ways that, might seem a bit separate to us today.
Right.
But they were entirely coherent, logical to those who first used this language.
Yeah.
Especially within that covenantal framework they operated in.
Okay, so let's unpack this word then. The most maybe literal sense, the first thing you might think of it often paints a picture of a really severe wind.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking, far beyond just a strong breeze.
Okay. Much more than that.
It seems to be the first main application we keep seeing in the sources.
Huh.
A scorching, burning, or violent wind. Just imagine the kind of wind that doesn't just, rustle leaves, but maybe strips the land bare.
Leaves desolation behind it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the full character of this destructive force as our sources describe it? What are we looking at here?
Well, what's really quite striking is how consistently it's portrayed as something inherently destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And intensely powerful.
Okay.
It's not just, unpleasant weather. It's presented as a force that consumes, that brings things to an end. The lexical entries, they paint a clear and honestly pretty terrifying image.
How so?
They describe it as a raging heat, or even more specifically, violent heat, especially of the wind. Think about that phrasing for a second. Violent heat of the wind.
Violent heat.
This isn't just hot air moving across the landscape. It's air so heated, so intensely dry that it carries this aggressive, almost physical impact. It's capable of inflicting severe damage.
Wow.
It's characterized not just as scorching, but also drying and burning. So picture maybe a desert wind, but amplified, to an extreme degree, sucking all the moisture out of the air, out of plants, out of any living thing it touches, leaving behind just, parchedness, desiccation. It makes the landscape brittle, vulnerable.
So it's a wind that sort of, by its very nature, brings about a kind of literal burning or consumption, even if there aren't visible flames.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. Through its extreme heat and dryness, it functions like a fire. Some sources even describe it as a whirlwind, the Hebrew art wak zelafot.
Whirlwind. Okay.
Yeah, which adds this terrifying, rotational, chaotic dimension to its already destructive nature. Just imagine the sheer force of a whirlwind combined with that intense consuming heat.
Yeah, that's a devastating image.
The impact on any environment, any settlement caught in its path, it would be catastrophic. And there's one particularly striking comparison from the sources.
Oh, yeah.
To the Arabic term, Indo as simûm. This term means poisonous.
Poisonous. Wow.
Yeah. So that suggests that isn't just about intense heat. It carries this deadly, noxious quality, almost as if breathing it in could cause illness or even be lethal.
So it's not just discomfort, it's actively harmful.
Right. Toxic, harmful. And maybe more broadly, can also denote a glow of wind, which I think vividly captures that radiating heat, the shimmering, visible effect of air superheated over a scorching landscape.
Like a heat haze.
Exactly.
Right.
Creating that almost mirage-like distortion that just speaks of intense thermal energy.
That really does paint a vivid and frankly powerful picture of a natural phenomenon. So where do we see the specific sense, the scorching wind, in action within the biblical texts?
Okay, so the key reference, the most illustrative one for this attribute, is found in Psalm 11, verse 6.
Psalm 11.6. Got it.
Yeah, this verse is really central to understanding this aspect of the word because it grounds the concept squarely within a theological framework. It's not just about weather.
Okay. How so?
Well, in this context, it stands, and the sources say this explicitly, in Figgy YHWH's judgment. It directly links this severe scorching wind to divine retribution.
Ah, okay, so it's not random.
Not at all. It's not presented as some impersonal meteorological event. Instead, it's depicted as an instrument, something wielded by the sovereign God.
Right.
And the verse doesn't just stop there. Its association, in the very same poetic lines, with fire and brimstone, that's esh gofrit, powerfully symbolizes God's wrath, his just punishment against the wicked.
Fire and brimstone, that immediately brings certain images to mind. Sodom and Gomorrah, things like that.
Exactly. That pairing immediately invokes those images, those ancient narratives of divine judgment. It signals not just punishment, but utter annihilation, overwhelming consequences for sin.
So it's definitely more than just a destructive wind in this context. It's being presented as a deliberate act of divine justice, bringing about, well, comprehensive destruction.
Precisely. That's exactly it. The visual of this burning wind, coupled with fire and brimstone, it creates this stark, undeniable image of consuming judgment. It illustrates a divine act of consuming, a complete undoing of those who stand in opposition to God's righteousness. And this depiction, it really showcases God's active involvement in the world, doesn't it? Wielding natural forces as instruments of his righteous decrees.
Yeah, from a Reformed perspective, that really speaks to God's absolute sovereignty.
Absolutely, where even the elements obey his will and serve his purposes, whether that's in creation or, as here, in judgment.
So the wind isn't just a force of nature in Psalm 11.
No, it's an agent, an active participant in the outworking of the divine will, carrying out his righteous decrees. It signifies a complete, total, inescapable consequence for those who persist in wickedness.
Wow.
It really underscores a worldview where the natural order isn't separate from the divine order, but rather integrated, often serving as the visible manifestation of God's rule and justice on earth.
Okay, so that's the first major meaning, this intense, consuming, judgmental wind. But now, this is where, for me, it gets really fascinating. The word shifts. It moves from these external natural forces to a different kind of internal burning, physical suffering.
Right.
How does that work? How can a term that primarily means a scorching wind also end up depicting intense hunger? It seems like quite a leap at first glance.
It does seem like a leap, but there is, as you said, a clear conceptual thread running through it. It really highlights the semantic flexibility of Hebrew. It raises that question. How can a term for a scorching wind also depict intense hunger?
Yeah.
And the answer, I think, lies in that shared experience of an internal consuming fire.
An internal fire.
Okay. The main biblical context for this usage is in Lamentations chapter 5, verse 10. And, Lamentations is a book just steep in the agony and destruction of Jerusalem.
Right, a book of sorrow.
Deep sorrow. And here we find the phrase Zaphot Gravath. Now, this isn't just, feeling a bit peckish.
No, I imagine not in Lamentations.
Definitely not. The interpretations provided by our sources are chillingly vivid. Things like fits of hunger, hunger pangs, and this one really gets me. Fever heat of famine.
Fever heat of famine. Wow. That sounds absolutely agonizing. It suggests more than just an empty stomach, like a systemic breakdown.
It is, exactly. The phrase vividly depicts being, quote, ill or sickly due to prolonged lack of food.
Okay.
This is far more than just discomfort. It's a state of severe physical debility, a wasting away of the body, where your internal processes feel like they are literally burning you from the inside out.
So the body itself becomes like a furnace.
Yeah, consuming its own resources. It's quite literally eating itself alive as it starves. The term captures the body's desperate struggle against depletion, that internal physiological turmoil that feels like a burning sickness.
Right.
It conveys not just the absence of food, but the active, destructive process of starvation, as if a fire is just raging within your very core.
So it becomes a kind of metaphorical fire of famine, where the internal suffering directly mimics the external burning of the wind we talked about earlier.
That's the precise analogy, yeah. It's drawn out in some sources, which reference an Arabic term, sa'aa, al-jubar. Literally, that means a fire of famine.
Wow. A direct parallel.
A direct parallel. It draws this powerful analogy between the burning heat of the wind and that searing, consuming sensation of starvation. It's an incredibly visceral way to convey the agony, isn't it? Almost making the internal experience tangible through that imagery of heat.
Yeah, it really does.
And what's also interesting is that our sources cite references from other ancient cultures too,
Yeah.
like livos athanos, limos athops, which means scorching famine, from the ancient Greek poet Hesiod,
Okay.
and also ignia fames, meaning fiery hunger, from the Roman rhetorician Quintilian.
So this wasn't just a Hebrew idea.
Apparently not. It demonstrates these ancient cultural parallels for the same kind of imagery across different civilizations. It shows its widespread conceptual grip. It suggests this wasn't just some unique Hebrew idiom, but a shared human experience of suffering, expressed in remarkably similar fiery terms across diverse ancient cultures.
That underscores the universal nature of that kind of affliction and how powerful that description is.
Exactly.
And this idea of famine as consuming,
Yeah.
it really links back directly to that initial concept of heat as a destructive force, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
It's the same core idea, an intense, destructive, consuming force just applied internally instead of externally.
Precisely. And, while it's not explicitly stated as divine judgment right there in Lamentations 5.0 itself, the context is crucial. The extreme suffering of famine, particularly in Lamentations, of a book reflecting on the utter destruction of Jerusalem and the consequences for its inhabitants, well, it certainly suggests consequences of societal or spiritual failing.
Right. The whole book is about the aftermath of judgment.
Exactly. And this aligns perfectly with a broader biblical pattern, doesn't it? It's consistent with other texts, like Ezekiel 5, verses 2, 12, 16, and 17.
Okay, Ezekiel 5.
Yeah, where Ezekiel explicitly ties famine directly to divine punishment for covenant disobedience and idolatry. He actually calls famine one of God's 4 dreadful acts of judgment against Israel for its rebellion.
Alongside sword, wild beasts, and plague.
Right, that's the one. So even if it's not explicitly tied to God's hand every single time it appears with famine, the overall biblical worldview, especially considered from a reform standpoint, emphasizing God's sovereignty and justice, often presents such catastrophic events within a framework of accountability before a righteous God. It reinforces the idea of a universe governed by divine law, where both obedience and rebellion carry tangible, often severe consequences.
So it brings, even in the context of famine, into that realm of God's righteous governance over his creation.
I think it does, yeah.
It's quite chilling how the language conveys such a visceral sense of suffering. The word doesn't just tell you about hunger, it almost makes you feel the burning, the consuming nature of it.
It's very evocative.
It really gets to the core of extreme human affliction. It draws you into that lived experience of extreme deprivation in ancient times, just through the sheer communicative force of the word itself. So, okay, we've looked at the external, violent wind of judgment. We've looked at the internal, physical torment of famine's burning. What does this all mean when we consider the full range? Because it also applies to a completely different domain, an internal emotional state.
Yes, and this is another remarkable shift, isn't it?
It really is, from outward forces and physical torment to something deeply personal, internal, emotional.
And this sense reveals a fascinating internal burning, but one that has clear moral origins this time. Here, the word takes on a figurative meaning. It moves away from literal heat or physical pangs, yet it still holds on to that core idea of intensity and consumption.
Okay, so where do we see this?
The main biblical context for this application is Psalm 119, verse 53.
Psalm 119, longest chapter, all about the law.
That's the one. And the phrase there is aphah akazatni. It literally means something like, has taken hold of me or seized me.
Seized me. That sounds powerful, like an emotion that overwhelms you.
Exactly. It's a powerful idiom, and is understood by lexicographers and commentators as meaning rage, indignation, or perhaps zeal.
Okay, rage, indignation, zeal. So it's not just any anger. It seems like it's a specific kind of righteous, morally charged emotion.
Precisely. That's the key distinction. It refers specifically to a feeling of righteous anger or strong opposition. And crucially, it's explicitly directed at the wicked. That's Sorzea Mershaim.
Right, against those who disregard God's law in the context of Psalm 119.
Exactly. So this isn't a fleeting temper tantrum or some kind of personal affront. It indicates a justified moral outrage, a burning indignation at injustice, at impiety, at disobedience to God's law.
So it's an anger that arises from seeing what is right being violated.
Yes.
Yes.
A passionate defense of God's truth and holiness. This aligns very well with a reformed understanding of righteous anger, doesn't it? Where sin isn't just a mistake, it's an offense against a holy God, and it justly provokes indignation in those who share his zeal for righteousness.
Like a consuming passion for truth and goodness. A holy disquiet in the face of evil.
This is a good way to put it, a holy disquiet.
Yeah, that's a powerful internal fire. Now, does this emotional heat, Does it manifest physically at all, like the other meanings of avi did with the wind's heat or the famine's fever?
Well, that's a fascinating detail that one of our sources actually highlights. It seems to bridge that abstract emotion with a concrete physical sensation.
Really?
Yeah. It notes that this mild righteous anger, as it calls it, may cause a basal response to skin temperature.
Skin temperature, like you actually get physically warmer.
Potentially, suggesting maybe a physical flush, a warmth, or perhaps even a slight, measurable rise in body temperature. It brings that abstract emotion right back into a relatable physical realm. It reinforces the heat element of the word, even when it's used figuratively for an internal state.
That's really interesting.
And the idea of horror, or a terrible feeling, also connects to this strong displeasure. It's not just being mildly annoyed. It's a feeling that can be quite overwhelming, deeply disturbing, even horrifying in its intensity. It reflects the gravity of the wickedness that provokes it.
So it consistently describes experiences that aren't just intellectual, but deeply felt, often physically manifested.
That seems to be the case, yeah.
Now, what about other ancient perspectives? Like, how did the Septuagint, the Greek translation, handle this multifaceted term, especially in Psalm 119?
The Septuagint. That's a really interesting point. The Septuagint translates in Psalm 119.53 as umia.
Athevia.
Athemia. What does that mean exactly? Well, this is where it gets particularly interesting. Because while the Hebrew often implies this fiery rage or strong indignation against the wicked, aphah more typically means despondency, dismay, or even lack of spirit.
Despondency. That sounds quite different from rage.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not a trivial difference.
Yeah.
It really raises a crucial question about the interpretive choices of those ancient Greek translators.
Like, what were they thinking?
Exactly. Did they perhaps see the psalmist's intense feeling not as an outward fury, but rather as an inward distress, a dejection caused by witnessing widespread wickedness?
So maybe less burning anger and more crushing sorrow.
That could be it. It suggests that for them, the psalmist's experience of was perhaps a profound discouragement or sorrow over the state of affairs, a heavy-heartedness that settled upon him because of the ungodliness around him, rather than an active outward explosion of anger.
So the Septuagint translators might have been grappling with the different nuances of themselves, maybe choosing a shade of meaning that resonated more with their own philosophical understanding, or perhaps emphasizing the internal burden of the righteous person rather than their fiery reaction.
Exactly. I think that's a very good way to put it. It highlights how ancient translators themselves wrestled with the rich semantic range and maybe the potential ambiguities of Hebrew words.
Right.
Their choice of ivia doesn't necessarily contradict the idea of intensity, though.
Yeah.
Because despondency can be an incredibly intense, consuming emotional state in its own right.
True, like a heavy weight.
Right. But it shifts the direction of that consuming force, maybe from outward direct dazel to an inward directed burden. It offers us a different lens on the psalmist's profound distress.
Yeah.
It invites us to consider that maybe encompasses not only the burning indignation that seeks justice, but also the inner anguish and dismay caused by the prevalence of evil. It shows the dynamic process of biblical translation and interpretation, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Where even ancient versions offer us alternative pathways into understanding the multifaceted nature of these powerful Hebrew terms.
It really is a consuming fire within, isn't it? Whether it manifests as that outward righteous anger, or maybe even an inward spiritual despondency at the sight of unrighteousness, it's an intense internal state.
Very intense.
And when you think about this emotional aspect of it connects, doesn't it, to feelings maybe of outrage or that passionate zeal for justice you might feel in your own life.
You can see parallels.
Yeah, it brings an ancient term into contemporary relevance. It allows us to see echoes of our own experiences in this rich ancient language, particularly as we, consider how sin grieves us and provokes that longing for God's righteousness to prevail.
That's a very pertinent connection.
Okay, so what's truly striking here, looking across all these meanings, is how this single word consistently holds on to its core idea intensity, consuming force while showing up in different grammatical forms and even in texts beyond the standard Bible.
Right. It's not static.
No, it adapts its presentation, its grammar, but it keeps that underlying powerful meaning.
And this term's morphology, it's a grammatical structure, and its appearance in other ancient sources. It truly shows its lasting conceptual weight and its remarkable adaptability.
Okay, let's talk about those variations. What forms does it take?
Well, when we look at the variations, we immediately see its grammatical flexibility. which of course allows it to connect seamlessly with these different contexts. The primary singular noun form is naturally ala,
Alapa, right.
but our sources also point out another singular spelling, alakapa. Slight difference in the vowel.
Okay, just a minor variation.
Yeah, these slight vocalic differences often just reflect maybe regional pronunciations or minor scribal traditions. They don't really alter the core meaning, but then we get to the plural forms, and those are particularly instructive.
Like the one in Psalm 11.
Exactly. We see iro zilafat. That's the plural absolute form, as we see in Psalm 11.6. And there it refers to multiple whirlwinds or burning winds, which suggests perhaps a proliferation of these destructive forces, maybe intensifying the sense of divine judgment as this overwhelming barrage rather than just a single event.
Right, multiple winds. And what about the form we saw back in Lamentations? You mentioned oh.
Yes, good catch. Oh, it's oft. That's identified as the construct plural form.
Construct plural. What does that signify?
Okay, so this grammatical construction is really crucial in Hebrew. It links two nouns together, forming a sort of possessive or descriptive relationship, like the X of Y.
Okay.
And it appears in Lamentations 5.10 in that phrase, O halafotrav, which we talked about as fits of hunger or hunger pangs.
Right.
So the construct form here indicates the O of hunger, literally the burnings of hunger. It highlights that the hunger itself is characterized by this intense consuming quality.
I see. So the grammar helps link the concepts.
Exactly. This grammatical flexibility shows how the word combines with other nouns to create these compound, nuanced ideas, like the burnings of hunger or the raging heats of God's wrath. It really reflects the rich grammatical architecture of Hebrew.
So it's not just a word found exclusively within the canonical Bible, then. Does it show up in other ancient Jewish writings? Maybe like the Dead Sea Scrolls?
It does, and that's highly significant, I think. Beyond the biblical texts, the word also appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which gives us further insight into its usage in a distinct, though related, religious community.
Okay. Whereabouts?
We find kumaro, likely, the plural form, again in 1 Q-aha, that's the Hodeot or Thanksgiving hymn scroll from Qumran Cave 1, specifically in column 13, line 30, which is also cited sometimes as 1 QH version 5, line 30.
Okay, the Thanksgiving hymns, what's the context there?
Well, the Hodeot are these poetic prayers. They often describe intense inner turmoil, spiritual struggles, profound experiences of the Qumran community members. And in this context, is often interpreted as agitations or maybe tremors of the soul or spirit.
Agitations of the soul, so more internalized again.
Yes, pointing to a profound, disturbing inner state. This shows a continued use for describing powerful, disturbing sensations or states. But here, the application seems perhaps more internalized and spiritual, reflecting maybe spiritual suffering or an intense emotional experience in the face of perceived evil or maybe personal sin.
Interesting.
Its appearance there demonstrates how continued its journey beyond the Hebrew Bible, reflecting a consistent conceptual understanding of intense, consuming internal forces in a different but related ancient Jewish religious context. It underscores the word's persistent relevance for describing deeply felt, overwhelming experiences.
That's a fascinating link. What about its etymological roots? Where does the word itself come from, and do we see parallels in other related languages?
Yeah, the etymology gives us even more insight into its core meaning. The term ingor is pretty clearly linked to the root za, and that root fundamentally means to rage or to be angry. This root provides the foundational concept for all those intense emotional or physical states that Iri describes. It's like the wellspring from which all its diverse meanings flow, indicating a core sense of agitation, intensity, and active displeasure.
Rage, anger. That fits well with the indignation meaning.
It does. And the basic meaning of the root is also tied, interestingly, to a glow of wind or anger, which, once again, brings us right back to that central idea of intense heat.
Right.
Whether it's the physical glow of a superheated wind or the internal metaphorical glow of a passionate emotion like anger, it's the visible or palpable manifestation of intense energy or fervor.
Are there parallels in other Semitic languages? Does that show a shared linguistic and conceptual heritage across the region?
Yes, absolutely. And these are incredibly informative. We find cognates, related words in other Semitic languages. For instance, in Jewish Aramaic and Syriac, we find terms like Allah, which means gale or storm wind.
Ah, so reinforcing the wind connection.
Exactly. These cognates illustrate a shared semantic field across ancient Near Eastern languages, reinforcing those wind-related aspects of Re. It suggests that the concept of a powerful, maybe destructive, wind was a shared linguistic and cultural reality, and that these languages had a similar conceptual understanding of intensely forceful phenomena.
Okay.
Furthermore, Iya is also seen as related to another Hebrew word, zanam,
Zan.
which translates to indignation or wrath. This connection further solidifies its emotional ties to concepts of strong displeasure or righteous anger. It creates this whole network of related words that confirm and broaden its semantic range.
So you see how concepts of intense heat, anger, powerful natural forces, they were all sort of interconnected in the ancient linguistic mind.
Yeah, it's a great way to summarize it, yes.
And are there any other ancient texts, maybe from the Apocrypha or deuterocanonical works, that use this word?
Indeed. We also find it in other ancient texts beyond the Hebrew Bible and the Dead Sea Scrolls, which again underscores its continued relevance. For example, in the Wisdom of Sirach, chapter 43, verse 17. Specifically, it's noted as a marginal reading.
Okay, Sirach 43.
We encounter the phrase Salah kasafan, which refers to a northern gale or whirlwind.
A northern gale. So again, linking it firmly to powerful, natural, often fierce winds.
Precisely. And the context in Sirach there is a description of the majesty of God's creation and his control over natural phenomena, which further solidifies those theological implications of Is as an instrument within God's sovereign rule.
Right.
So whether you look at canonical scriptures, Qumranic hymns, or wisdom literature like Sirach, consistently evokes intense consuming forces, both natural and internal. It really demonstrates its versatility and its consistent core meaning across diverse literary and theological landscapes of the ancient world.
So it really is a word that carries its heat, so to speak, across many contexts. It adapts its nuance, its grammatical form, but it maintains that core identity. It truly is a linguistic chameleon, isn't it?
That's a good description. Yeah.
It can be a desert wind, an internal fire of hunger, or a moral passion, all while retaining that core sense of intense, consuming force. And when you know these linguistic connections, the root, the variations, the cognates, it really does help confirm and expand your grasp of the word's full range, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It gives you confidence in the interpretation.
Yeah. It demonstrates how rich and interconnected ancient languages can be, with a single root branching out into multiple, yet clearly related applications. It offers a deeper appreciation for the ancient author's precise and evocative word choices.
Well said.
So, okay. We've unpacked literal winds, physical pangs, burning emotions. After all that, what really ties these seemingly disparate applications of UA together, it feels like there must be a single unifying concept underneath it all.
Yes, and this is where we try to bring everything together, right? It raises that crucial question about the underlying conceptual idea. How can one term cover such varied phenomena, spanning divine judgment, human suffering, internal moral states?
Yeah, what's the common denominator?
Well, the answer, I believe, lies in that core conceptual connection that consistently runs through all uses of Ig, and that is its association with intense heat and consuming forces.
Intense heat and consuming forces. Okay.
That's the common thread, the unifying element that provides coherence to its diverse manifestations. Though they're distinct on the surface, the different meanings all share this common thread of intensity, distress, and a consuming burning quality, whether that burning is literal and physical or figurative and emotional.
So the central idea is always about an overwhelming, consuming intensity, regardless of the specific context.
Yes, I think that's the key. The word consistently describes something severe, impacting, and often destructive, whether it's described using adjectives like violent, raging, scorching, horrible, or terrible.
Right.
This underlying intensity is what allows it to span from a physical wind to an internal emotion. Because all these experiences are marked by an overwhelming force and a sense of being consumed or overcome by it.
Can you give an example of that consuming idea across the meanings?
Sure. So a scorching wind, it consumes moisture and vitality from the land, right?
Dries it up.
A fever of famine, it consumes the body from within, wasting it away.
Mm-hmm.
And righteous indignation, it can consume one's inner peace until justice is sought or acknowledged. In each case, denotes a force that grips, overwhelms, and acts powerfully upon its subject, whether that subject is external, like the land, or internal, like the body or the soul.
And throughout this whole discussion, we keep circling back to the idea of divine judgment, don't we? This word seems to have a particularly strong connection to God's righteous action in the world.
We certainly do keep coming back to that, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to reiterate that direct and powerful link to God's judgment, which is seen most clearly, most unambiguously in Psalm 11.6.
The burning wind with fire and brimstone.
Exactly. That's presented as an unambiguous instrument of divine retribution, a clear expression of God's just wrath against the wicked. No doubt about it there.
Okay.
Furthermore, while maybe it's not always explicitly stated as divine judgment in every single instance, like maybe in the famine context in Lamentations,
Right.
the severe consequences described by Sheaf, like that famine, consistently occur in context that implicitly suggest consequences of divine displeasure or judgment. I mean, the very destruction of Jerusalem and the suffering of its people in Lamentations are presented as divine chastisement for sin.
The whole backdrop is judgment.
The whole backdrop is judgment. And to understand this connection more fully, we can look at other biblical precedents, like we mentioned in Ezekiel 5, verses 2, 12, 16, 17, where famine is explicitly and repeatedly described as one of God's severe punishments for Israel's disobedience and idolatry.
Right. It's a tool in God's hand, biblically speaking.
It is often portrayed that way. So even when Ored is used to describe human suffering like famine, the broader biblical framework, and especially from a Reformed perspective, which emphasizes God's sovereignty over all things, often places such catastrophic events within God's righteous governance. It reminds us that suffering, sadly, can be a consequence of corporate or individual sin, and that God is sovereign over all circumstances, even those that bring great distress. This word, then, helps us grasp the often severe outworking of God's perfect justice in the world.
It truly is a comprehensive word, isn't it? Encapsulating so much. Could you just give us a quick, concise summary of those three main applications we've unpacked today, just to crystallize it?
Certainly. Yeah, we can effectively summarize the applications of O into three main conceptual categories. First, as natural phenomena. This includes that scorching, violent wind, the destructive whirlwind, and that raging, consuming heat. It speaks to the overwhelming, often destructive force of the elements, which is often directly tied to God's activity in the world in the Bible.
Got it. Natural phenomena.
Second, as physical suffering. We saw this vividly portrayed in the fever heat of famine, the intense hunger pangs, and the severe illness resulting from prolonged lack of food. It describes a consuming pain and wasting within the human body, a profound affliction.
Okay. Physical suffering.
And third, as emotional states. This encompasses those strong internal feelings like righteous rage, intense indignation against injustice, and spiritual zeal. It describes a moral or spiritual fire within the soul, often provoked by the presence of wickedness.
Natural phenomena, physical suffering, emotional states, all linked by that intense consuming heat or force.
Exact.
It truly highlights the richness of the Hebrew language, doesn't it? And how ancient writers could convey such multifaceted and intense experiences with, well, remarkable precision and economy of words.
It's very efficient language in that sense.
It is. It's more than just a word. It's like a miniature landscape of human and divine interaction. It illustrates how closely the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual realms were connected in that ancient worldview.
Very integrated.
This whole understanding allows us, I think, to appreciate the depth of the Hebrew language and how a single word could convey so much about ancient views of the world, human suffering, and the decisive expressions of divine action. It really invites us to consider how carefully chosen language can pack so much meaning into just a single utterance.
Absolutely.
Well, we've certainly taken a deep dive today into this remarkable word, uncovering its various shades of meaning, from those raging, scorching winds to burning hunger and intense, righteous anger. It really serves as a striking example of the profound economy and evocative nature of ancient Hebrew.
It really does. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the broader picture of language and meaning, it strongly suggests just how comprehensive and dense ancient Semitic languages could be.
Yeah.
Just consider how our own everyday words, in modern English, often miss conveying such layers of intensity and multifaceted experience. We often need multiple words or quite elaborate descriptions to achieve what a single, potent, ancient term like "ooh" could seemingly do.
That's a great point. We might say intense, consuming, righteous indignation fueled by witnessing wickedness, whereas Hebrew might just use ooh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And understanding this kind of insight into an ancient word like ooh wasn't just an academic exercise, is it?
No.
It subtly shifts our grasp of the biblical text itself. It invites us, I think, you, the listener, to read with greater attention to these specific potent terms.
Paying closer attention to the words chosen.
Right. And this kind of careful attention to the original language, it can actually reshape our outlook on core theological themes, things like suffering, justice, the varied expressions of divine action in the world, it can move us beyond maybe superficial readings into a richer, more accurate appreciation of God's Word. So maybe the provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. How might really understanding potent words like shape your own outlook on suffering, on justice, and on how God works in the world today?
That's a great question to ponder. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to consider and think about. Until next time, keep seeking those surprising nuggets of knowledge that reveal the depths of truth.
Keep digging.
This has been the Deep Dive on Reformed Thinking.